Join the conversation.
Join the conversation.
You're with Cape Talk.
That big appointment unfolds from here on in through till 10 o'clock. We've got the Naked Scientist, Dr. Chris Smith, joining us for the next 24 minutes, very nearly. An opportunity for those questions, those puzzling kind of questions that keep you awake at night to be answered. And you can lodge those questions via WhatsApp at 072 567 1567. And if you want to jump the queue, and that queue has kind of grown in the past couple of minutes, you can call on 021 446 0567. We'll prioritize that call, and you can put that question directly to the Naked Scientist. Welcome, Chris. It's great to have you back.
You're looking very dapper today, Clarence. I have to say, I like it. I like the look. The scarf is good. Is that sort of neckerchief you've got there with your top? I think you've definitely gone up a notch. Is this in honour of me, or something special happened?
I was actually talking about it earlier. I went for a haircut, and I normally do that kind of stuff myself. And then the barber, Moroccan barber, suggested that I have a bit of a mini valet. And I didn't think of it as a sales pitch. I think he looked at me and he thought, "Hey, you're looking a little unkempt. Maybe I can kind of sort
you look
you
really
out."
good. You do look really good. Keep go with it. It suits you.
Okay, so some more mini valets then on the cards for me
Definitely.
in the future. I was well priced as well, so I was quite surprised. Okay, let's go to that WhatsApp voice note first.
Môre, Clarence and Dr. Smith, Floris hierso van Woesterman. Dr. Smith, flu season. My wife and I took the flu shots, I think, 3.5 weeks ago, but we still got sick very badly. We could not taste our food. We've lost our appetite. So, yeah, what's the use then of taking these flu shots if it doesn't protect you from getting sick? Yeah, it almost felt like COVID, even though I don't know how COVID felt because I was not affected. And COVID was really real here. So, yeah.
Well, the answer
What
is
the flu shots then for? Have a good job, bye-bye.
The answer is, Barris, we don't know what you did have, do we? Because there are so many different cold viruses. Although we use the word "I've got a cold," there are hundreds of viruses that can cause the common cold. There are coronaviruses, there are adenoviruses, there are enteroviruses. There are literally hundreds of them. And then the rhinovirus is on top of that. So although we go for the flu shot, and that can stop us getting the flu 60 or 70% of the time, why not 100? Because the flu is a shapeshifter. It changes and evolves. And the vaccines that we make are a best guess at what the flu will turn into. They're also, no vaccine is perfect. So although we may have a vaccine, not everyone will respond. But 60 to 70% of the time, the scientists do get it right and it does protect us. But you don't know you got the flu. You may well have run into another virus and it's caused a flu-like illness, but it wasn't the flu. Thank goodness you didn't get the flu as well, because you can catch flu on top of some of these things. And we see patients who catch flu and COVID and a few other things all at the same time, and they feel really poorly. So the flu vaccine does work, but it won't work against viruses that are causing illnesses that are not the flu. And therefore, if you run into one of those, and they're far more numerous, so the odds are you're far more likely to get one of those, that could be what's happened here.
A question in from Anne. Anne wants to know if there's anything that doctors don't want us to know. Is there anything that you as a medical doctor don't want your patients to know? That's an interesting question.
Oh, probably doctors don't want their patients to know how much they smoke and how much they drink, to be perfectly frank with you. No, I mean, the thing is, when I went to medical school, one of the best quotes I ever learned was on the front page of a handout when we started our psychology and sociology at the beginning or the middle of the second year. And it said there, a healthy patient is someone who has been inadequately screened. So in other words, everyone has skeletons in their health closet, and if you look hard enough, you will find them. Now, talking of health, there's one really important subject we have to discuss, which is my homework from last week. You were very, very diplomatic and didn't try and catch me out, and you've waited for me to volunteer that I have done my homework.
Actually, Joe said I must prompt you. Joe's on the ball. Yeah.
No, Joe has got my back because he looked after me again and said, "Have you done your homework, Chris?" I have. I've done my homework. The question was, when a newborn baby is born, do the eyes change shape after we're born, because there's this claim that your eyes when you're born are the same size they're going to be as a baby as they're going to be when you're an adult. And this is one of the reasons why a newborn's eyes and young children's eyes look huge. Have they got adult eyes in a baby's head? And the answer is no. This is a myth conception. It's not correct. The eyes do grow and change shape quite dramatically over the life course. Most of that growth happening in the first couple of years, but then a bit more as we age. And the average eyeball diameter is about 16.5 millimeters when we're born. And in you and I, as an adult, it's about 25 millimeters. So that's about 50%, 75% increase in size. So the eyes do get bigger in mammals when we go from a baby, a newborn, through to our adult selves. And that's why I said the other day, my puppy appears to have eyes that were much smaller when she was first born, and they now appear bigger, and her vision has definitely improved. She couldn't see sticks when you threw them very far before, and now can easily see them. So I think that as her eyes have changed shape, the focal length has adapted to be correct, and now she's seeing correctly. And so this is a myth. Your eyes are not the adult size when you are born. They do grow as we get bigger.
Bradley Thomas has a question. Dr. Chris, I work in a dusty cement environment and developed a bit of a scratchy throat. I'm very active. I have no health problems. Will my body get used to this? I do wear standard PPE.
We have to be really careful with these dusts. We didn't used to recognize the risks, and thousands to millions of people have died of chest complaints because of occupation exposure to dusts. This was first picked up by people mining coal, and there's a condition called pneumoconiosis. If you take lung specimens, and museums have got historical lung specimens from coal miners, and they are absolutely black with coal dust, and this causes a progressive fibrotic change to the lungs, impairing lung function. And people who work with other kinds of minerals, asbestos being a classic one, they get fibrosis. The people who work with other occupational dusts, and people who work in quarries, for example, again, these dusts can cause a silicosis. It causes inflammatory reactions, fibrosis changes, and gas exchanges impaired in the lungs. We now recognise those risks, and you absolutely should take as many steps as you can to minimise your exposure. And wearing decent PPE, so something that can exclude dust when you're breathing, so a particle filter, so not just gases. These masks come in different types, and they have a particle rating, and they also have a gas rating. So you need to make sure you wear the right PPE for the right sort of thing. So do wear something that will keep this out. And if you're getting a scratchy throat, you're almost certainly being exposed to an extent that is causing changes in your body. So you should take that seriously and make sure that you're wearing the right sort of thing. But in some environments, it's very hard to avoid dust, isn't it? And if you're in a polluted area as well, where you've got car fumes and everything else, all these things are cumulative and are not good for our health. And the World Health Organization, they rate bad air as one of the leading causes of death and disease internationally. It kills more people than many other things that we can do that are bad for us. So bad air, bad for us. Try to avoid it.
And then a question from Keeson. At what point would a Voyager 1 leave our solar system, becoming free of it and no longer part of the solar system's gravity? Has it reached that point, or when does it reach that point?
It has reached that point already. A number of years ago, it went through the so-called heliopause. The sun blasts out radiation into space, and you reach a point where the radiation from our own sun is about the same as the radiation coming in from interstellar space, and this is known as the heliopause. And then you cross that line and you're into interstellar space, and you're seeing radiation chiefly from elsewhere in the galaxy. And the Voyagers have done that. They've breached that limit. They've left the solar system. They did it a number of years ago, but we are still in contact with them. Amazingly, they're powered by a radioactive power supply, which is dwindling in terms of its ability to support systems now. And they've slowly had to turn things off on the probes to have enough power to keep them active. They are still talking to us. It takes the messages about a day to get out there and then get back. So it's an amazingly short conversation, but a long turnaround time because they are so far away, and light travels at about 1 billion kilometers an hour. So you can think if it's taking over a day for the messages to get out there, that tells you how far away they are now.
Loads of questions. N. Lois wants to a question around looking into very bright light. A question in about herbal remedies. A question about prognosis as well and dementia. And we'll get to those questions in a short while. But first, let's go to Poloso from Centurion. We prioritized your call. Welcome.
Hello, great show as always. I just want to find out, Dr. Chris, can a person be cloned?
The answer is probably. And certainly it has happened naturally, but I don't think anyone has legitimately done this artificially. What do I mean by that? Well, how do we do cloning, first of all? When we say cloning, the way we've made cloned animals, like Dolly, the famous cloned sheep, and I actually was very lucky to meet and interview a few times Ian Wilmot, who was the scientist who's now died, sadly, who made Dolly the sheep. She was the first cloned mammal. But the way they do those cloning experiments, which have gone on to be repeated on monkeys and also on dogs, for example, is you take an egg cell from a mature female and you remove the genetic material from it. You take a skin cell from the animal you want to clone and you get the genetic code out of that skin cell and you put the genetic code from the skin cell into the now devoid of genetic code egg cell, and chemicals in the egg cell kickstart the right genetic program in that mature DNA, making it think it's an egg that's just been fertilized. All the right genes are turned on, and it starts to produce a new embryo, and that embryo, in a small proportion of cases, it's not a very high ratio, is as you get into more complicated animals, the rate of success goes down dramatically for various reasons, and we don't understand all of them. But when you then implant that embryo into a receptive female, they behave a bit like an IVF pregnancy. It takes, and then you grow a baby, and that baby is almost genetically identical to the animal that you've cloned. Why only almost? Because the mitochondria, the energy powerhouses in the cell, come from the egg. Therefore, they're from the donor egg, not from the original animal, and they have their own genetic code. So there's some slight differences, but the genomic DNA is identical. Could you do that for a human? Well, we can do it for monkeys. We can make it work. It's a low efficiency, but we can make it work. Therefore, it probably would work. Do we know that cloned humans exist? Yes, because anyone with an identical twin is a clone. And they are genuinely genetically identical, because what happens with human genetically identical twinning is that when an egg forms, when an embryo forms, so an egg is fertilized, for some reason, in a very small number of cases, the embryo splits in two. And because embryos, very early embryos, have stem cells that are so-called pluripotent or totipotent, they can produce all the different cells in the body. If you split an embryo in two at an early enough stage, then it's got stem cells in there that can just produce everything again. So you get two genetically identical humans, and off you go. You've got a twin who looks like you, often behaves like you, but then the upbringing is the same. And if you tested them genetically, you couldn't tell them apart. So if one of them committed a crime and you did the genetic fingerprint, you could possibly point the finger incorrectly at their sibling, and they would say, "I didn't do it. It was my brother or sister." And you couldn't say on genetic terms who actually committed the crime.
This is Views and News with Clarence Ford.
Only on Cape Talk.
The Naked Scientist, Dr. Chris Smith, and your questions via WhatsApp 072 567 1567. A question from Pera. He writes, "Hi, Doc. When someone in their 80s has dementia and it's visibly deteriorating, what is the likely life expectancy in years?"
This is an impossible question to answer. And there are some people for whom a diagnosis of dementia comes very late and they are not destined to live very long. There are other people who are otherwise in excellent health but develop a dementia state, and they can have many years of life ahead of them. The key thing here is quality of life. And it's perfectly possible for people who have certainly early stages of dementia. They'd still be diagnosed with dementia, but they're in the early stages, to have a good quality of life. It just takes adjustments, and it can be very hard work. It can be very stressful, and people must prepare for that and be under no illusion. But it is perfectly possible to have a good quality and standard of living. It isn't necessarily a downhill path straight from the get-go. And there are many people who have enjoyed many happy years and have gone on to continue to make life work for them despite a diagnosis of dementia. This is something we're going to have to confront increasingly as we go into the future, because the population of the world is aging for all kinds of reasons, but foremost because of living conditions improving, good water, good food, good living environments. This is translating into a dramatic increase in life expectancy across the globe. And as a result, more people are living long enough to develop diseases of old age like dementia. And some estimates are that in some countries, as many as 30% of people may end up with dementia. And this is going to become a major problem for us, how we care for people when we have that many people who probably will have many years of healthy life ahead of them in terms of physical health, but they've had a cognitive decline. And this is why the race is on to try to find ways of managing the condition, diagnosing it very early so that interventions can be put in place meaningfully to stop it or arrest it or slow it down when people still have good cognitive function before it actually begins to manifest and cause problems for them. And we're, I think, seeing the first steps towards that, because in the last couple of years we've seen drugs like donanemab and lecanemab, which are these treatments, antibodies, which are infused into the blood. These appear to be able to soak up one of the things that we know is causing the problem in the brain or is associated with the problem in the brain, and this seems to slow down by a small margin, but it's a significant margin, the rate at which the disease progresses. So it shows us that we might be able to meaningfully intervene in dementia states, at least some of them, in the near future. And that is every reason to be optimistic, but in the meantime, it is impossible to answer the question when someone is diagnosed with dementia, how long have they got left?
Let's go to Matt's question via voice note.
Good morning, Clarence and Dr. Smith. I have a question. Sometimes when I go to the doctor, they'll prescribe me some sort of herbal thing or something fairly dubious sounding. Do you think they're just trying to placate me because they don't want to give me an antibiotic, and so they give me something so I feel like I've been prescribed something at least? Or in your experience, do some of the doctors actually believe that some of these herbal things actually work?
I think it would depend who you went to see. And in some cultures, in some countries, there is enormous heed and enormous emphasis placed on traditional cultural remedies. Some of them are evidence-based. We've been exploring them in recent years and find that some of them actually have a good scientific basis for why they work. Others, though, are hocus pocus. But it doesn't mean they don't work, because there is this thing called the placebo effect. And we know that up to a third of the effect of some interventions is purely because the person wants there to be an effect and believes it will work. If you take a painkiller and you tell people this is a magic painkiller, it's brilliant and it's going to make you feel much better, you can just inject people with water and they will say, I feel so much better, about a third of the time. And this is the power of the placebo effect. What it does is it activates in your brain your own natural pain-killing system. It invokes the pain-killing system that drugs like morphine would plug into, and your mind itself turns that system on without any active ingredient in the drug. So the placebo effect and a person's belief in being better, feeling better and feeling well is very, very powerful indeed. So we would be completely wrong to dismiss the effects of things like homeopathy, which is homeopathic. It doesn't contain anything or do anything based on scientific principles, but it certainly can invoke the placebo effect. Prayer helps some people. Socializing is very powerful as a curative therapy, but when you go to the doctor, we don't mislead. And if any doctor misled a person in saying that they were giving them something and they weren't, that would be unethical. But giving people something which we know does have an effect because it invokes the placebo effect. Well, what's wrong with that? If it works for a person, it doesn't make them worse, does no harm, that's the most important thing, but does make them feel better, and it doesn't also cost them a fortune, that's got to be a good thing. So don't dismiss things just because they may be off the normal distribution of normal medicine. If they work for you because they're working through these other channels, use them. But don't be under any illusion as to what's the real deal and what is homeopathy.
We're going to have to rest it there. Big thank you to the Naked Scientist, Dr. Chris Smith, and a weekly interaction just after 9:30 on a Friday, right here on Cape Talk.
Join the conversation.
Join the conversation.
You're with Cape Talk.